welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. My name is Jessica. I will be hosting you today, and I'm here with an author who's going to talk about a book that I think is really important because, as somebody who's gone through this in a different facet, I don't think it's really addressed enough or talked about enough. So, without any further ado, I'm going to welcome Paul Pennington to Syosset Library's podcast and tell us a little bit about yourself and the book Gut Punch.
Well, thank you, Jessica, and thanks for having me. Yeah, it was a book I never intended to write. And as most aspiring authors, I put off writing my first book till I was 59 and really had no path forward on a vision as to how I was going to ever find something that would motivate me to write. This book, it wasn't like something pushed me to write it. It was really out of necessity. I had packed in so much emotion, so many memories, so much of who I was. I just kind of packed it away and I hid it in order to stay in the fight, to be a caregiver, to be present in the moment. And, well after great news came our way and my wife went into remission, and she jumped back into normal, I was just trying to figure out what was wrong with me, why I wasn't able to join her with such joy and such reverence for life. And so I used a journal to unpack a lot of this. And as I did, I started to regain portions of myself that I had lost, memories that I had lost. And that eventually motivated me enough to help others. So what started as a journal turned into something on my laptop and eventually into a book that I hope others find helpful in their journey to regain parts of themselves.
So we talked a little bit before this podcast, just to kind of give you a little background on myself. So I do mention it a few times every now and then on here, I had my own caregiver situation. Unfortunately for me, it didn't end as positively, and I'm so happy to hear that it did for you and your wife. But one thing that really grabbed me is just the fact that I really, like you said, like I felt, I don't even know how to describe it. It took me a really long time to really understand that there was like a trauma. There was something that had happened. And
Yeah.
I think that you really hit the nail on the head. Being a caregiver, it carries its own trauma, and I don't think we talk about it enough. So talk a little bit just about like, like the book in general and sort of like what you found, what surprised you, because for me, it just like it didn't even register that, like I'd spent all this time being hyper vigilant. I'd spent all this time and sort of like energy, just everything being in this moment of trying to help the people I was caring for. And then when that's not there anymore, you don't even realize your brain is transformed, or at least I didn't.
And I think that's the case for most everyone I've talked to about it. I mean, nothing prepares you for it. There wasn't any skills, there wasn't anything you could rely upon in your past that says, okay, I'm ready for this. You just have to be present and be available and be ready to deal with whatever comes next. I titled the book Gut Punch because that's what it felt like, obviously, when the phone call came and we were sitting in our kitchen in a really safe environment. And she got diagnosed with breast cancer. And so there was your gut punch. Gut punch number 2 came pretty quickly after. It just wasn't breast cancer. It was a very rare, very aggressive form of breast cancer. And that meant we had to dive in quicker. We had to select a medical team faster. And we had to be prepared for a really intense treatment path. And so there wasn't really time to catch up. There wasn't any time to absorb what was going on. Normal just shifted abruptly underneath our feet, and you dive into your new role. Whatever your priorities were, they're no more. And the outside world doesn't catch up with that, really, ever. People call you up, check in, how you doing? Good. Everything great? Yep. I mean, you just avoid the conversation of bringing them into what you're dealing with. So you start really feeling isolated, and that becomes comfortable for you. So those are really the big shifts that I felt from the time the phone call came to diving into treatment and just resetting priorities in such a quick, fast manner that you just weren't prepared for. So your friends that you raise kids with, that you're so close with, they want to be there for you. They want to help, but they don't know how to help. And so you just kind of dive in and do it your way. And so many caregivers talk about that. They talk about standing tall, being strong, being that flight attendant on a plane in heavy turbulence. When everyone looks to their reaction to see what's going on, and you have to be stoic. You have to be just vigilant and strong. And that was always my approach with my wife, of course, with my friends and family. And so when we got the good news and she was so ready to dive back into life, I didn't know what to do. I was so confused. I just felt numb, and I wanted to still remain isolated. I didn't want to dive back into life so quick. And the more I talk to caregivers now, because that's really the path I'm on, I'm just trying to pay it forward, our experience forward, by shining a light and starting a conversation, because the spotlight needs to be on the patient. It has to be, by God. I mean, what they're going through, the treatments and the ordeal and the stress. So you have to have the spotlight on them, which means the caregivers live in darkness. And we don't address it. We don't talk about it. We just bury it, and we bury the shovel. And that's the worst thing you can do. And that's what I did. So I'm just trying to really start a conversation, shine a light, burn a fire around the idea that caregivers have trauma too. It's a different type of trauma. And a lot of that trauma isn't really felt until afterwards, after treatment ends and the world gets quiet again, because up until that point, you're in fight or flight. Your adrenaline's pulsing through your body. And then when the adrenaline stops and it's not needed anymore, confusion sets in. So that's really the basis of what I was trying to describe in the book. I had to go through in detail the treatments and some of the chemo language. I did that more so because I do want caregivers to have a base fundamental, foundation walking into this as to what all of this means, all the terminology, all the new conversations that you're hearing and absorbing. I wanted to give some foundation for that, but I really wanted to focus on the aftermath. What comes next?
I mean, yeah, because you are sort of insulated in this bubble of new, like new verbiage, and just sort of watching, like watching medicine and medical teams do what their jobs are. Whereas, like on the outside, we've all seen some medical drama or some TV
Yeah.
series where problems are solved in an hour, or like you hear jargon, but it's not the same when this is like something you have to be working with someone who's sick to make active decisions and make sure that like you have to like really trust these doctors, and
Yeah.
like try really hard not to go down rabbit holes to see the angles, because otherwise you really will lose it. But it is true, again, like the aftermath is just so bizarre, because you are left with everything that was there before, but re-engaging with it is so difficult. Like what have you gotten, so you mentioned, have you gotten to speak with a lot of caregivers about this, and like had anything really surprised you, or did you find that they were just really happy to have this commonality where they felt like they were being heard?
Yeah, I think that's it, Jessica. I think it's that feeling of being understood. Because so many people, they want to reach out to you, they just don't know how to, and they can't understand what's wrong with you. Why aren't you happy? You should be joyous, right? Because particularly in this our situation, um, once we got the phone call that the tumors hadn't just shrunk, they had disappeared. I mean, this was a medical home run. I think it even surprised our oncologists in places. So you would expect them not to be surprised, but our oncologist sat with us and cried, and he was just amazed at not just her ability to get through it, because she had to answer the bell week after week after week after week. There was no plan B, there was no backup plan for her type of cancer treatment. They had one shot. They had to throw the kitchen sink at it. And once the surgery occurred and they realized that the tumors were gone, you know, I think all of our friends and family and people close to us just expected me to, snap back into what I was. I'll never be that person again. And that's the hardest thing to really understand is your normal's gone. It's toast. Whatever it was, it's no more. And that's okay. That part's okay. And that transition is really what I like to talk most about. Because the treatments, the ordeal, the perseverance, that shift leads you to this place. And that place is, what's the new normal going to look like? And that's what I like to talk about most. But you hit it on the head when you said, when I speak with caregivers, the first part of the conversation always starts with, oh my gosh, like you mentioned, don't go down rabbit holes. We all use the same terminology. When you first get the diagnosis, the last thing you should do is jump on the internet, because you don't even know what the treatment looks like yet. You don't know what size of tumors you have yet. You know so little, and you're hearing terminology for the first time. Don't go down rabbit holes is an important element. And when you say those types of phrases, it's amazing how we all line up together. We are all in this together, but we felt so isolated because we're not having these types of conversations. So, I always like to start with that to gain some commonality before I start talking about the transition between who we were and who we're going to be next. And that to me is the most important part of the message I try to deliver in the book.
I think you did. Also, you just hit on a really important note that, yeah, you're not going to be the same person again.
Yep.
And like any big life change, be it, like you're having kids or, like just anything, like it is a seismic shift. And sometimes it's really, really hard for you to understand it, but also for people around you to understand it, which is why I also do think that it is important for books like this to be written, and why conversations like this are really important, because a lot of people are going to be wondering why you're not joyous, or why you isolated yourself, or why you continue to isolate yourself. And it's just so you can't explain it. It's really, really hard. But again, like that's okay. And you guys, you're able to, like your wife is able to live her life, and it's like, but in a way, like you're both trying to figure out like what that means post what you went through on completely different ends of that spectrum.
Yeah. And for her, I talk about her just becoming the yes girl. She, once her body was able and she recovered, she said yes to everything. She said yes to life, you know, learn how to golf. Yes. Run to Cabo. Yep. She was yes after yes after yes. And I was trying to ride shotgun, but I was faking it because I wasn't present. I needed some grace of time, and I needed a minute to figure out what was going on with me. And so that was a challenge for sure. The book, people say to me constantly, aren't you excited? Because next week it actually gets released. Um, aren't you excited? Aren't you pumped? And I'm like, no, I'm really not. I mean, I say it. It was a book I wouldn't have chosen to have written, and I'm not thrilled with the idea of being so vulnerable, so open. People get to, hey, the barn door's open. Look at me. Here I am. I feel exposed because for so many years as a litigator in business, as an entrepreneur, I had to hide all of those things to show strength. As a caregiver, I had to hide all of those things to show strength. And here I am saying, look at me, look at all the challenges I went through. And I did that to help others. And I'm still apprehensive about next week when the book actually gets released. My wife hasn't read it yet. My kids, adult children, haven't read it yet. Close friends haven't read it. It's just going to be that moment where I'm going to be vulnerable and open and transparent for the first time really in my life. So I'm excited for others who need it, who it can help, who can understand they're not alone. There's nothing wrong with them. They need to be excited about the opportunities that are available to them now, because we all tapped into this deep reservoir of strength and resilience that we didn't know we had, and so we tapped into it. We know we have it now. We know it's available to us. And now there's an opportunity for us to grow from that, to be something different, to write a book, to teach a law school class, to do things I probably would never have done but for this. So I'm trying to leave it with a message of hope, excitement, optimism. But there was a big path you had to walk down to start seeing that optimism, seeing that hope again, and finding joy again. So that's where the message lies, and I hope that message is delivered in the book. But yeah, no, it's been interesting the last few weeks as my wife knows it's coming, and she's not worried about the way I portrayed her or our journey. She's worried about how I'm going to feel being so open, transparent, and vulnerable.
Well, again, thank you so much for sharing. Like I said, this is really important. And that's also not to say that cancer memoirs from the point of view of, people who've experienced it and gone through it are not important as well. I think, like I said, like they're two different journeys, and it is really, really hard because you really have this. There really is just something that changes within you being on that other end of it. So I'm hoping that people get a lot out of it. I wish you good luck. I
Thank
think,
you.
again, I think it's really important. And maybe you'll write another book that'll be
Yeah,
uh
that
yeah.
that part is definitely going to happen. I want to write a book that I um, become really passionate about as far as the topic and the agenda of it. And you know what? Learning the whole book industry has been interesting as well. I mean, there's been some good that came from that. I had no idea. I was so naive going into this. Your world, not mine, Jessica. And so I sent the manuscript to two publishers. I sent it to two literary agents, and all four responded really, really positively. I chose one of the publishers based on a connection I felt with one of the people that was reaching out to me. And from there, I've just been learning by the minute, by the day, by the week, an entirely new industry. So I might as well use that knowledge base and write about something that I'm really passionate about. But for now, I'm extremely passionate about getting this message out that people aren't alone. There's nothing wrong with them. There's a phenomenal world, new normal waiting. They've just got to go find it.
Thank you so much. Check out Gut Punch. Once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. My guest was
Paul Pennington, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming, and we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.